most absurd nightmare. I was poor and no one liked me.
Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy are trading places.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On previous videos, I had said that there was a Zionist plan for Osama bin Laden to escape from Afghanistan to Iran after America demanded the Taliban to hand him over. This had actually already taken place in Sudan earlier, when President Clinton demanded that Osama be handed over, and the leader of Sudan agreed despite being Osama's friend. And so Osama escaped Sudan and went to Afghanistan. And so they thought that they could do this again by threatening the Taliban using the carrot and stick method. They said they will either carpet bomb the Taliban or they will give them a carpet of gold depending on whether or not they agree with their demands. And since until then the Taliban used to have good relations with Saudi Arabia, the Saudis used to say that the Taliban will eventually agree. But in the end, the real Taliban refused, and so Osama stayed in Afghanistan, and then America invaded Afghanistan in 2001. The question that you may ask is this, however. Why is it that after they killed Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora in 2001, why didn't they then fake videos of him escaping to Iran or hiding in Iran? Of course, now they have brought back the old Iran narrative that was ruined by Osama and then by Zarqawi in 2004. They are now saying that the Taliban are pro-Iran, and the fake Al-Qaeda in Syria also supports this new fake Taliban who came to power in 2020, 19 years after 9/11. And so they are telling stories about Osama bin Laden's son supposedly living in Iran with the knowledge and permission of Iran's government, and the Taliban, supporting Iran, and the fake Al-Qaeda supports this fake Taliban. So it's basically they're pushing the narrative that all the Mujahideen are together under the leadership of Iran. All these new stories that we're hearing in the past couple of years are completely fake, of course. But why, you may ask, did they not fake videos of bin Laden in Iran after they killed the real one? Couldn't they have, at that time in 2001, claimed that Osama escaped to Iran? Well, the first problem is that the narrative wouldn't have made much sense, because the Taliban refused to hand Osama over, and they were fighting against both America and Iran. This whole thing wouldn't have been very believable. Because, even if they were going to say that, the Taliban betrayed Osama, well, if they betrayed him, how come they're still occupied? How come they're still fighting against America? So there was some, of course they could have faked things and told lies, but overall there were a few reasons why they couldn't tell people this narrative and make it believable. But still, they could have made Osama appear more pro-Iran, or show in fake videos that Iran was helping him, but the Taliban were not helping him, or something like that. Remember that at that time the Taliban were portrayed as being fake, especially by Iran. So the Zionist narrative back then was that the Taliban are fake and Iran is real. Only recently they presented the narrative that Iran and the Taliban are together, because back in 2001 everyone actually knew that the Taliban hated the government of Iran. And Iran was actually at war against the Taliban even before America officially invaded Afghanistan in 2001. So what was the reason that they didn't fake a video of Osama linking him to Iran in some way after 2001? I believe the reason was that at that time the Taoists who control Pakistan had become very anti-Zionist and were trying to destroy the Zionist TV narrative using the internet. You see, what the Zionists wanted was for Osama to escape to Iran and then say that the Taliban sold out and agreed to hand over Osama to America, as did Sudan earlier. And so the only Islamic Sunni governments at that time who weren't completely fake or agents of the West were to be portrayed as sellouts, and so Iran was to be portrayed as the only genuine brave Islamic country who refused to sell out to America and the West. The Taoists, however, wanted to ruin this plan for several reasons. One was that the Taoists want to ruin the Zionist plans, especially especially at that time, especially during that time. Secondly, it was the Taoists who had helped create the original Taliban. And so, of course, they didn't want the Taliban to be discredited in favor of Iran. And of course, they didn't support America's invasion of Iraq in 2003. And they knew that Pakistan and Egypt were next on the Zionist list after Iraq and Afghanistan, that they were going to be invaded next. So just as the Zionists wanted Iran to be portrayed as the haven of Mujahideen, as they wanted Iran to represent Islamic resistance and jihad against Israel and the West, the Taoists wanted Pakistan to be seen this way by the Muslims, because like the Zionists, the Taoists also want to have their own fake Islamic narrative, especially at that time when they were going against the Zionist narrative. And that is why eventually we were told that Osama was hiding in Pakistan, and that the Pakistani military and government knew that he was hiding there. Of course, the whole story was a lie. The real Osama was killed in 2001, and that 2011 story was a complete fake. But that's why we were told that the Pakistani government knew that he was hiding in Pakistan. You see? To make it seem like basically Pakistan was doing what Iran was trying to do. So instead of Iran hiding Osama, they said that Pakistan is hiding Osama. That's how the Taoists agreed with the Zionists to go along with the narrative of Osama being responsible for 9/11. That, hey, if you want us to say that he's behind 9/11, you have to say that we gave him refuge. We were the ones hiding him. I've already explained in detail what the Taoist narrative is on my video about Leo Zagami and Alex Jones, which I made in 2014. So if you want to know about this in more detail, watch my older videos, especially on archive.org. So anyway, since Pakistan didn't support the Zionist narrative, if the Zionists had faked videos of Osama bin Laden, the Taoists would have exposed them on the internet by showing real bin Laden videos or by faking their own videos of bin Laden, thus creating doubt regarding the Zionist narrative by contradicting the narrative. This is why the Zionists had to come to an agreement with Pakistan when faking Al-Qaeda videos, as Pakistan is right next to Afghanistan, and so Pakistan could easily at any time release the real bin Laden videos on the internet and completely ruin and expose the Zionist plans. So instead, they came to an agreement regarding the narrative. Of course, the Zionists were planning to eventually betray the Taoists. And this is what they actually did several years later when they overthrew Musharraf in Egypt, and then brought about internet censorship, and also overthrew the Taoist Hosni Mubarak of Egypt and the Taoist Gaddafi government of Libya. And eventually the Taoists came to a new agreement with the Zionists out of desperation, with this new pro-Iran Taliban that the Zionists and Taoists have created together recently. Another reason why the Taoists became so afraid of the Zionists was because of the so-called 5G towers that were built by China. And China is, of course, run by the Zionist Illuminati. So they were afraid that they may get targeted and killed by the Illuminati using China. In fact, I believe that the Taoists wanted to control the jihad in Afghanistan in order to make it focus on fighting against China before the whole pandemic, and stop their plans in advance. But since the Taoists failed to recruit us and it was too late by 2017, they decided to just sell out to the winning team, to the Illuminati. So anyways, I believe that back in 2001, the Taoists had their own narrative, plans, agenda, and also they had their own soothsaying. And that brings us to the movie from 1983 called Trading Places. The movie is about two men whose lives are deliberately replaced with each other. The white rich man becomes poor and homeless, and the black poor homeless man becomes rich and gets the rich man's job and even his house. One of the reasons I believe that this movie was made by the Taoists is the repeated appearance of the number 9 in the movie. 9 is of course a very important number for the Freemasons. But why? Well, in the Freemason numerology, the word Tao equals 9. This is why the number 9 is so important to the Taoist Masons, because 9 is another way of saying Tao, and remember that Tao is the god of the Taoists. So anyways, later in the movie, the white guy and the black guy realized that the dukes, who are symbolic of the Zionist Rothschilds, were conspiring against them both, and so they stopped fighting each other and instead decided to cooperate together against the dukes, meaning against the Zionists. And then that's actually when we see the number 9 constantly being shown. When these two start working together against dukes, against the Zionists, we keep seeing the number 9 showing up near the end of the movie. So what does this have to do with Osama? Well, if you watched my recent videos titled The Soothsayer's Conspiracy Using Obama, I explained that Obama is copying Osama. Now think about it. Osama was very rich, but then he went to Afghanistan to fight for jihad, and so America made it illegal for his rich family and relatives to contact him, and eventually Osama ended up isolated, and he ended up living in caves and mountains, like a very poor, homeless man. Obama, however, we're told, came from a very humble background. His grandfather was supposedly a goat herder, but he supposedly became wealthy and and became a highly respectable politician by working through the system, in order to make us think that we can achieve anything within the Zionist system and anyone can become president regardless of race or social background. So the rich Osama became poor and the poor Obama became rich. Hence the movie's title, Trading Places. Not only that, but the rich white guy also gets arrested in the movie and is accused of being a criminal, again similar to Osama bin Laden.
I'll bet that man could run our company as well as your young Winthrop.
Are we talking about a wager, Randolph?
Is there a problem, officers?
Oh, Winthrop. I'm glad your parents are not alive to see this.
What? No, wait! Now this is totally preposterous. I'm not a thief.
Here we are. William.
Take off your clothes.
You are making a career decision here.
Take off your clothes.
Did you hear what this man said to me? Now, I have witnesses. This man is physically threatening me.
Hey, Randy, Monte, this is nice. I like this.
I had the most absurd nightmare. I was poor and no one liked me.
Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy are trading places.
Freeze, slimeball!
Moi?
Put that gun away at once, Winthrop. You lost your mind?
Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy.
But as I said, I don't believe that this movie is related to the Zionist messages and subliminals that we've looked at on previous videos. I believe that this movie was actually part of the Taoist agenda against the Zionists. And it's even against the $1 bill, the $1 bill that has the pyramid and the one eye. The bad guys use that symbol in the movie. So this goes to show that it's actually an anti-Illuminati movie, but it's actually a Taoist movie, you see. It's a Taoist movie against the Illuminati. You see, the Zionist agenda was to actually to get Obama... the Taoist agenda was to get Obama and Osama to work together against the Zionists. But you might ask, but don't they already control Obama? No, because Obama is controlled by the Zionists, not by the Taoists. In other words, the Taoists wanted Obama, who is controlled by the Zionists, to cooperate with Osama by bringing both the Muslim Obama and the Muslim Osama and the Zionist Obama under their own control and converting them to their own version of Islam. That's right, I believe that the Taoists actually wanted to convert Obama to Islam. Not to the real Islam, but to their own brand of Islam. As I explained before, the Taoists wanted Iran and Afghanistan to unite and become one country. The problem, however, is that most Iranians are Shia and most Afghans are Sunni. The Taoists wanted to create their own version of Islam, which focuses more on Persian nationalism and Persian traditions rather than Shia and Sunni, and thereby they wanted to accuse any Sunni who opposes Persian traditions and Persian unity of being a Wahhabi, and of course they also created ISIS or ISIL to control those types of Sunnis, so that they could even control the ultra religious ones who refused to combine Shia and Sunni together. The problem, however, was that Iran has been controlled by the Zionists since 1979. Although this movie was made in 1983, just 4 years after the Zionist Khomeini took over Iran away from the Taoist king. So the Taoists were still hopeful at that time that they can take Iran back from the Zionists. In fact, there were many attempts by the Taoists to replace Khomeini with the king's son at that time. And during that time, they were also arming Saddam to help him weaken Khomeini during the Iran-Iraq war. And there was also the MKO or MEK, سازمان مجاهدین خلق, and those guys were hoping that, and the Taoists were hoping that the MEK would eventually take over Iran from Khomeini. In fact, the MEK were originally in the government and revolution of Iran, but later they turned against Khomeini and they went and sided with Saddam Hussein. In fact, this MEK group, also known as سازمان مجاهدین خلق, are exactly what the Taoists want in Iran and Afghanistan. This group, despite being Shia, doesn't actually care about Shiism and have no problem with Sunnis such as Saddam, so long as they are socialists. In other words, they care more about socialism than Shia-Sunni sectarian issues, but they aren't pro-West either. In fact, despite not being ultra-religious, they do strongly believe in jihad and are literally called mujahideen, سازمان مجاهدین. And it was this ideology that the Taoists wanted to unite the Iranians and Afghans under, in order to fight against China before China could bring about the vax. They were also planning to use them against Israel and Syria, eventually. But of course, by 2017, they concluded that it's too late because they knew that this thing was coming in 2019, and out of fear of being wiped out by the Illuminati using China, they decided to compromise with them even more, and that's when the internet became almost identical to television. And almost everyone on the internet started selling out to the Zionists. So yes, believe it or not, the Taoists actually wanted Obama and Osama to join this socialist Islamic ideology, which despite being Shia is not concerned much with Shia-Sunni divisions, but it's really about bringing back the old Magian Taoist traditions and just calling it Islam. In other words, the Magians who are controlled by the Taoists, the lower level Taoists, the Blue Lodge Taoists. They wanted to transform Islam into Blue Lodge Freemasonry, Taoist Freemasonry, Blue Lodge Taoist Freemasonry. That's what they basically wanted the Afghans and the Iranians to unite under. So anyways, the Taoists wanted Pakistan to be seen as the haven of jihad, so that in this way they could control the Mujahideen worldwide who would travel to Pakistan in order to join the jihad in Afghanistan. But while in Pakistan, those people would be indoctrinated into the version of Islam that the Taoists want and would control them using a sheikh before sending them off to Afghanistan to make sure that they can control them in the future. So this is the main reason why the Zionists didn't fake any videos of Osama bin Laden escaping to Iran or having connections with Iran at that time, because then the Taoists would expose them on the internet using their own fake bin Laden videos, or by showing the real videos which many people on the Afghan-Pakistan border have. But of course, as usual, the Taoists failed in their plans. They failed to take over Iran. In fact, the MEK was defeated every time they tried to conquer parts of Iran. They failed to deceive the Zionists into slowly handing Iran to them. In fact, the Taoists themselves were deceived by the Zionist Ahmadinejad actress, who was pretending to go along with their plans but was really serving the Zionists all throughout her presidency. And they also failed to recruit Osama from Sunni Islam to Taoist Islam, or to recruit Obama from Satanism to Taoist Islam. So they failed at pretty much everything they were planning to do, which is why so many of them have started actually converting to Satanism recently, as they realized that their leaders are a bunch of losers, and their prophecies, the soothsaying which they think are prophecies, were actually false prophecies. And so basically the Taoist sorcerers have been discredited. As I mentioned before, the MEK followed a Shia man called Dr. Ali Shariati. I've actually read some of Shariati's books, and basically he is a Shia who is very pro-Sunni, but more than being pro-Sunni, he is pro-socialism. And this is why his followers eventually joined the socialist Sunni Saddam against the Shia Khomeini during the early 1980s. Shariati was against many traditional Shia practices, such as the Ashura rituals, but he was also against some things that both Sunnis and Shias have in common, such as slavery. Of course, I'm against the modern definition of slavery, as the Quran actually uses the term "those whom you righteously own," not "those whom your right hands possess," which is the usual but false translation. But my point is that Shariati was against it completely, not just against a certain interpretation of it. Shariati was clearly against traditional Islamic practices in general, not just the Shia practices. He, for example, didn't have a beard, and I think that he also didn't believe in hijab, or at least he didn't take hijab very seriously. However, there was one aspect of Shia-Sunni difference where Shariati sided with Shiism, and that's regarding prostitution or mut'ah. That's right, Shariati actually supported temporary marriage or prostitution and condemned Omar radiallahu anhu for opposing it. So now you may ask, why would such a pro-Sunni person who wanted to genuinely unite the Sunnis and the Shias be okay with prostitution or mut'ah? I mean, there is evidence even from the Shia books against mut'ah or prostitution. For example, in Wasa'il al-Shia, there is a narration from Ali himself saying that mut'ah is haram or forbidden. So if Shariati was pro-Sunni, why didn't he use this narration to forbid prostitution or mut'ah? The answer is that Shariati really had a different agenda. He wasn't a Sunni. You see, these Taoists have a problem. They actually don't have any problem with prostitution or dating. In fact, you might remember several years ago how Alex Jones was constantly defending Charlie Sheen and his relationship with whores. I was saying that the Illuminati themselves have gay prostitutes, but Charlie Sheen is with women, so that makes it okay. So in other words, he was saying that Charlie Sheen is better than the Illuminati. He at least doesn't go out with gay prostitutes. He goes out with female prostitutes. You see, this is one of the agendas of the Taoists, and one of the problems they had with me from the start. In fact, my first video on my Zakah 1 YouTube channel, even before the one exposing Obama, was the Temporary Marriage is Haram series. And even at that time, that video series got very few views compared with my anti-Illuminati videos, which used to get hundreds of thousands of views and very positive ratings. This is one of the reasons why the Taoists decided to make me join their dark side, or ISIS, and as I showed, ISIS even started copying my appearance a few years after. Because I made my first video in 2008 on Zakah 1 on the Zakah 1 channel, and about 4 years later we saw that about 5 years later we saw that ISIS started copying me. This is one of the funny things about these Taoists, that they actually think that romantic love is the dark path and prostitution is positive, it's the light path. Anyway, in the same movie Trading Places, when the rich guy becomes poor and homeless, a prostitute helps him out, and she eventually helps him take revenge from the dukes, meaning that the whore helps him defeat the Zionists. And when he enters her home, on the floor we see a Masonic chessboard. So in case you have any doubts about this being a Masonic movie, there's the chessboard, the prostitute who is portrayed as a good person, and the rich man's wife or fiancée is portrayed negatively, And of course, there's the number 9. So all this clearly shows that this is a Taoist movie. And remember, these Taoists, even though sometimes they seem to be against the Illuminati, ultimately they're really against Judaism. Eventually they sell out to the Illuminati and just attack Judaism. And because Judaism is against prostitution and whoredom, at least, they actually hate that aspect of Judaism.
Unless that crop report... God help us!
They don't hate the Illuminati as much as they hate Judaism. Anyway, so we see the Taoist Masonic agenda all over this movie. But this also reminds me of the movie Total Recall, where Arnold joins the soothsayers inside the Masonic whorehouse with a chess floor. This is because at the end of the day, this is all soothsaying. All of these movies are based on soothsaying. And soothsaying is based on truth, although they also include many lies. I believe that it was the Zionist soothsayers who confused me with Osama and Zarqawi. But the Taoists had their own soothsaying, which also failed to come true, just like the Illuminati soothsaying. So in the end, they both lost. So yeah, basically, the Taoists actually wanted Osama and Obama to both convert to a fake version of Islam that would be controlled by the Taoists themselves, who are based in Jordan and Pakistan and Germany. And so in this way, they would unite America, Iran and Afghanistan in a war against China many years before 2020 or 2019. Many years before the whole thing. And in this way, they would stop China's plans in advance so that they couldn't bring about this whole satanic thing that's, that we see today. But their plans have failed. And it's their fault for trying to, manipulate people and control people. Because at the end of the day, they didn't want Muslims to have, real power and a caliphate. They wanted to control us for their own benefit. They just wanted to use us, you see. They wanted us to be their pawns. And of course, when they saw that not enough people were joining their groups, they eventually gave up and sold out to the Illuminati.
Do you have any better ideas?
Yeah, it occurs to me that the best way you hurt rich people is by turning them into poor people.
Hey, Winthrop! Winthrop!
Can I give you guys a word of advice? Lose the beards, because your King Osama looks like a kind of dirty wizard or a homeless Santa.